Greetings, greetings, greetings. I'm super excited. Welcome to the second season of the Moving Camp podcast. We've heard a lot of the positive reviews that individuals have been giving us for this podcast, and I'm super excited for this next kickoff of this season that we're doing of the podcast. And we got a special treat, special guest in front of you. This is going to be very unique, and the reason for that standpoint is this is going to be about something that everybody can participate in. This is going to be probably like one of the most wealthiest podcasts that we're going to have, because we know that health is wealth. And in June is Men's Health Month, so this is nothing more appropriate than having this in. Now, I had a chance to talk to this individual a couple of times, and I love his energy. I love his personality. I went to the United Supreme Council's workshop for men's health, and he did a phenomenal job. And this is just going to be a great opportunity for us to be able to learn more and get more education that can go on for our next generation. So without further ado, I love to be able to introduce Sovereign Grand Inspector General Dr. Keith Melvin out of King Solomon number 20 out of the Orient of Ohio. So we're going to be talking about men's health, and I'm going to bring him on, and we're going to be able to get it going. So Dr. Melvin, indeed, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. And like I said, give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself and some of the background and your history, and then we'll jump right into it.
Thank you so much, Sublime Prince Barett. So I'm out of the Orient of Cincinnati, Ohio, specifically. I went to Fisk University and HBCU in Nashville, Tennessee, across the street from Meharry Medical School, Tennessee State. Graduated from there, did graduate school in organic chemistry, came to the University of Cincinnati's College of Medicine, where I graduated in 1980, and was trained at Jewish Hospital here in Cincinnati. It's the oldest Jewish hospital in the country, and I was the fifth African-American to be trained at the hospital there. The first is Sovereign Grand Inspector General, Dr. Chester Pryor. He actually was the first African-American to be trained in the city of Cincinnati in a private hospital. Dr. Chester Pryor, who's Sovereign Grand Inspector General Emeritus and the former Director of Medicine here for us. And so I've trained in internal medicine, and over the course of my 40 years, I've done a lot of things, but one of the most important things I did was I survived prostate cancer when I was in my 40s. And because of that, I was sent on a mission because I had a test, so I wanted to give my testimony. So I started going around telling men in Cincinnati the importance of getting screened and checked for prostate cancer. Had no idea where that was going to lead me, but it actually led me to speak all over the city, then around the state, and then I ended up becoming a national grand rounds lecturer, where I lectured on health topics for the Network for Continuing Education in over 25 states. Did that for several years. Now, at the twilight years of my career, I now am not in my private practice. I actually teach internal medicine residents at Jewish Hospital here in Cincinnati. And I also am assistant clinical professor of medicine at the University of Cincinnati, where I teach and instruct medical students, only the African Americans or those of color, if you will, specifically in their first through all 4 years of their medical school training. So been well-versed, and I would say that in 2000, when I had surgery for prostate cancer, nobody was even talking about men's health. There was nothing about men's health. There were no men's health symposiums. There was nothing about it. It wasn't on the radio, it wasn't on TV. They didn't have it in the magazines. There were no Black men's health magazines. Nobody talked about it. When I saw Black men, they told me they didn't believe in medicine, don't even believe in doctors. So these are the kind of barriers that we've had, and these are the kind of challenges that the doctors have faced for the last 25, 30, 40 years, where we've just been trying to get Black folks to lower their sodium, know their numbers, exercise, find a doctor that they can trust, decrease your smoking and decrease your drinking. I do want them to have a targeted goal that they might be able to reach. So I won't say quit smoking yet, and I won't say quit drinking, but decrease the drinking, decrease the smoking, and increase the exercise. And if you're going to be shaking sodium salt, which we do all the time because we believe it makes the food taste better, we're going to have to shift to some different kinds of substances for our seasoning And certainly I recommend sea salt. It's a better salt, doesn't raise your blood pressure, and it actually has some beneficial effects where it helps your salivary glands, help your food taste a little bit better, it helps you digest food and so on and so forth. So yes, for the last 20, 25 years, I guess now I have been a part of the engine that is running the train to direct the Black men in America to try to live longer. And then you say, what is the deal about that? And why are we even concerned? Well, the main reason is that Black men in the United States suffer worse health than any other racial or ethnic group in America. And Black men have the lowest life expectancy and the highest rate of death as compared to any other group in the United States of America. And I think that's where we are going to start. And that sets the table, Sir Brian Prince Barett. And now we'll just have to cut the cake.
Now there's a lot in there. When we're talking about what we're going to talk about, like this is something. So you already kicked on a couple key points, and we're going to go back. The first one we're going to go to is one. I think hopefully when you watch this, one, Dr. Melvin's being very realistic, right? He said something key, a doctor that you can trust, because culturally there's certain things that we partake in as African American men. So first question I had for you here, or Dr. Melvin, is how do you find some kind of physician, or like what are some of the characteristics or things somebody should look for when they're looking for like a primary care doctor, somebody they know that they can trust and can support them?
Well, certainly there's no blueprint for finding somebody who you are compatible with. It's like finding a girlfriend, finding a wife, etc. You meet a doctor and you hope things work out. But certainly, ideally, like everybody else, you like to have somebody that looks like you, thinks like you, walks like you, and talks like you. So yeah, ideally, Black men should, if they can, have a Black physician, male or female. Certainly, recent studies were just done and showed that African American women fared better in terms of their outcomes when they had African women doctors. And now, in terms of the percentage of doctors, 5.4% of the doctors in America are Black, but now there's 10% of the medical students are Black women, where only 3% are Black men. So the women are going to have more opportunities. And I would say that I don't shy away from a Black man going to the Black woman doctor, because she's probably going to be a little bit more readily. Clearly, in terms of cultural issues, she does understand more about what you're thinking like and talking like and acting like, so she can help you. And the important thing in that too, Steve, is, when you have preventative medicine issues and you're talking about doing screenings for cancer, you're talking about taking vaccinations and just coming back to the doctor. If you have a doctor that you have a rapport with and you kind of at least like them, at least like the way they looked, the way they looked at you and had a dialogue at their bedside, you're likely to come back. And as you establish yourself with the doctor, then my patients and other doctors' patients long term feel like they are having me hold them accountable. So when they come back, they feel like I've got to straighten up now. I'm going back to see Dr. Melvin. So whatever I had been doing, I've got to try to clean up my act. Similarly, what you mentioned earlier is, we have all seen it. When a guy goes to the doctor and his wife or significant other comes with him, we usually get down to the nitty gritty, and we won't be talking about sports and all those other things. So I think it's important for us as men, having a partner with you when you're going to the doctor, and someone else that's helping to hold you accountable. Because I'll admit that as men, we're so macho and so big, bad, tough, and strong. We don't need doctors and don't need anybody holding our hand or anything. And I submit to you that the cemetery is full of macho men. Just ride over there, drive around.
I remember you told me that when I talked to you, and I was like, hey, that's true. I'm not going to lie. Some of the best work I've done is because I've consulted with my wife. My wife is awesome.
Yes.
Like I said, she holds me accountable. And also, too, let's be honest, most of the time, they're the ones that's cooking, too, as well. So if we're all on the same page and we're moving through in the same direction, it's just going to be a lot easier, right? Because I'm pretty sure that if men if we had to change our eating habits, but the whole family changed, we're going to stop generational curses. So I don't see anything negative by having that connection. You know what I mean?
There's nothing negative about that. And you're exactly right. And of course, in many households, the man cooks. And so I also want my significant other, my wife, to have gone to her doctor if she's a little overweight. And let me just mention that statistic. So in terms of the overweightness, 44% of Black men are overweight, and 37% of them are obese. That's terrible. And those are the two factors that leads to the diseases that we, as some of us call Black man's disease, that is diabetes, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. We call Black man's disease. And what happens if you got diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol? You end up with a heart attack, a stroke, a kidney failure that cut your legs and feet and toes and things off. That's what happens to us. We must change the paradigm. We have to change the way we're approaching the way we just live every day. And it can't be going on the keto diet or whatever. You buy 20 guys, people's books, go on a diet, and the diet just gives you something to quit. My thing is that I must submit to you that you got to change the way you're eating. And I'll just say for me personally too, Steve, is that when I was diagnosed with diabetes about 8 or 9 years ago, I was way over the top. I was buying 10-pound bags of potatoes, and I'll admit it right here. And I was frying potatoes and onions 3 even 4 times a week. And the last time I did it, I had diabetes already. The last time I did it, I'll admit that I peeled 14 potatoes. 14 potatoes, the whole 5-pound bag. And I looked and said, I ought to be ashamed of myself, especially being a doctor and all. I'm getting ready to fry 14 potatoes for me and my wife and my son. And we're going to argue about who gets seconds on the fried potatoes. We didn't even have anything else for dinner. We just had fried potatoes. Now, I said to myself, that's it. I'm not going to go any further. Well, I'll admit to you, I didn't throw them away. I did fry that last 14 potatoes up. And I haven't bought a bag of potatoes in my house in 7 years. And now, as a diabetic, my hemoglobin A1C we'll talk about later, but mine is 5. I've lost 30 pounds. My A1C is 5, which is looking like I'm almost not diabetic. And so for me, it was a lifestyle change, which we talk about. Changing my lifestyle so that it's easy for me to do some of the right things.
And one, hopefully when people watch this too, you can see the honesty that comes out there, because I'm hard. I don't like to listen to people that I don't feel are being truthful, right? It's hard to kind of follow, but I saw your symposium and everything, and it's extremely genuine. So one, thank you for that, because somebody else is in the same situation. Like I talked to you before, like I'm diabetic, right? Like my A1C was at 14.7 when they figured it out. And it's like, man, we have to make, like, man, I was 35. Like, come on now. Like I thought that was like impossible. So hopefully people that watch it and say like, hey, like we have to do something quickly. Now, the first steps of this, I think, from what you told me from the symposium, is you made a statement of saying know your numbers. Can you go a little bit more in detail by what that means by know your numbers, so that we can give the brothers like kind of like a starting point?
Specifics. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Knowing your numbers. First of all, let's just talk about what happens to Black folks. We all got high blood pressure or whatever, and high blood pressure is a symptom of hypertension. Hypertension is the disease. It's the disease that is a silent killer, kills Black folks all the time. And over the age of 55, 85% of African Americans have blood pressure that needs to be treated. Now, let me say this. The treatment goal is for your blood pressure to be and always be less than 140/90. And in my clinic with my residents in my training program, we have our residents oftentimes giving the patient a log so you can take your blood pressure once or twice a year, or a day. And when you come back in 5 or 6 weeks, bring your log back. Let's see what your pressure looks like when you're at home, let alone how it is when you're in the doctor's office. But it's important for you to be checking your pressure so you'll know and have an idea if your blood pressure really, truly is under control. And less than 140/90 is the goal that you are certainly clearly reaching for. Ideally 130/80 or something if you're diabetic. And let me say this, if you're taking one medication, that's probably not going to hold, because the meta-analysis of all the hypertension studies shows that African Americans on average require 3.4 drugs to control mild to moderate hypertension, let alone severe hypertension. And Caucasians require on average 2.7 drugs. So if you're only taking one drug one pill that only has one component, it probably is not going to hold you. So all that coming in the office saying, Doc, I just don't want another pill. Well, let's give you a pill that's got 2 or 3 components in it, and then you can be taking 2 or 3 drugs in one pill. Better about your compliance. I want you to be able to join in with me and work here with me and partnership with me, because me and you have to have the same targeted goals. And the goal is for you to stay here as long as possible. But while you're here, you need to be as healthy as you can be, so you can take care of the responsibilities that you Black men have of taking care of your families and yourself.
Now, see, you learn something new every time we go here. So I didn't know that on average for Black men, the drugs have to, you said 3.4, right? You need
Yes,
3.4 components just to be able to manage hypertension
mild
and
to
some of the,
moderate.
and that's okay. That's interesting because I only have one. So now there's another question now when I go back that I'm gonna ask, be like, hey, like what's in this? What's going on? Because I might not have enough that's going to help me get to my goal.
Well,
So,
make sure it's
wow.
140 over 90. It's less than 140 over 90.
Okay.
Now, let's just say, Steve, while we're on this topic, I think we should definitely clearly mention to the listeners the kinds and uh, class of medications that you should be taking. And in the Joint National Committee that shows what kind of medications everyone should be taking, the first line of therapy are calcium channel blockers. And those are drugs like amlodipine and verapamil and felodipine and deltiazem, but the most popular one of those is amlodipine. The second drug in that class, they are ACE inhibitors or angiotensin receptor blockers, and those are drugs like lisinopril, ramipril, and enalapril, whatever. And the ARBs, angiotensin receptor blockers, are losartan, valsartan, olmesartan, and azosartan, and so forth. Now, the third in that class are the diuretics, the hydrochlorothiazide or the chlorothalidone. So those 3 classes of drugs are what you should take in the first line of your therapy. And I'll dare say to you that most African Americans over the course of time need a drug from all 3 of those categories to control their blood pressure. And I said at the United Supreme Council, lisinopril or the ACE inhibitor drugs, the drugs that end with PRIL, are not good drugs for African Americans. When we had the All Hat study 30, 40 years ago, that was lisinopril was in the study, and it proved to be a very good protective drug for diabetes and all those things, and it was equal to the other 2 categories as far as blood pressure is concerned. But over the course of 30, 40 years, where we've now seen folks taking it, we've seen, and studies are showing that lisinopril increases the risk of a stroke in African Americans. And it increases the risk of that ACE cough that people get, and also angioedema. Lisinopril causes more angioedema, where your tongue and your lips, your throat swells up and might close. And no matter how short of a time you've been on it or how long you've been on these ACE inhibitor drugs, that kind of deadly and dangerous reaction can occur 10, 15, 20 years later if you're still taking that drug. And now, to substitute for that, the angiotensin receptor blockers, or losartan, valsartan, olmesartan, azosartan, those do all of the same pros that the ACE inhibitor does, but they don't have the cons. And I suggest for African Americans that we take those ARBs, those sartan sounding drugs, and not the ACE inhibitor or the pril sounding drugs. And the most prescribed medication for blood pressure in the whole United States is lisinopril. It's cheap and it's good, but it's not a good drug for us. Besides that, for it to work, you have to produce a substance called renin from your kidneys, and African Americans are low renin producers, so it doesn't work as well. And we are volume expanded individuals, so it just is not a great product for us. We should be using something different and not taking chances on something that could be substituted and done, provided much more favorable benefits for African Americans, period.
No, so right now, everybody, if you want to pause, right, rewind that back. Because for most of us, let's say like somebody like myself, like, yeah, I went to school, went to college, but some of the terminology, I'm going to have to write that down. So real quick, you also like take it, rewind it back, write down what he said, because that's going to be valuable. Because these are, again, when you're talking about having a relationship with the doctor, like this is the conversation now you have. You come in there informed, and I'm just going to make an assumption here. And Dr. Melvin, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but if you are a patient, you come in with well-researched questions, it's going to be kind of hard for you to kind of get what I like to call the okie doke, right? So this will give you a chance, and that can be able to build the relationship because maybe you find out your doctor's like, no, that's exactly what I got you on this, and this. And then now your guys' relationships, your comfort level, your willingness to go back to that person is going to be highly increasing overall. The end goal of you being here longer and healthier is going to be a truer statement, right? So
Well, me and my patients should be on the same page in terms of the outcomes we're seeking. And uh, I don't have a problem with somebody coming in and having read something and just ask me about it. But I would say this to you, Steve. Everybody that's practicing medicine has not read data about African Americans, but that's what I do. I read data and information about African Americans because in my 40 years, 90% of my patients have been African American. And one of the things I do in teaching my internal medicine residents now, who by but none of them are African American. They are Canadian, they are Indian, Pakistani, from the Peru, the islands, Africa, they're from everywhere. So it is my assumption that the point and purpose of me being there is to teach them some of the nuances in taking care of African Americans, because who can better teach them than the doctor with 40 years of experience? And so that's the objective that I have. And so I have equipped my patients that if you're on these kind of drugs, these are the kind of things that you just need to know. And you're going in just to talk to your doctor objectively, say, it seems like maybe I should be on one of these other substitute medicines instead of this because I saw where it increased the risk of stroke. And the good doctor would say, well, let me see. And all he has to do is pull up the first thing. It's going to say it increases the risk of strokes in African American. First thing you pull up from the ALHAT study. So, and he'll say, oh, why? Maybe because what he's been doing for 30 years is treating Caucasians and other folks where that is not an issue. That is not an issue. So we should not be taking the lisinoprils, ramipril, enalapril, or whatever, benazepril, ideally. And the worst of those is lisinopril. And that's the cheapest and most prescribed drug. We should be taking, that's an ACE inhibitor. We should be taking one that it goes by ARBS and ARB, because those are drugs that end in sartan, losartan, valsartan, olmesartan, candesartan, azosartan, whatever. Sartan ending drugs are better for African Americans in hypertension, period. They both protect your kidneys and they're both helpful in many other things, but that is a safer drug for African Americans, and price is not an issue.
Well, and I hate to switch subjects, but I think this is just as important because you said something, and now I was thinking in my head as you're speaking, like, oh, okay, so what if I never joined the Scottish Rite? What if I never gone this way, never gone to United Supreme Council? I would never have been able the opportunity to be able to sit in your symposium here at United Supreme Council. And one thing that came out is like we have individuals who might not be in that not be well versed, but we found out there's very few male doctors. Like it's changing. The climate's changing, right? So I know you said I think you're the fifth, if I remember correctly, fourth or fifth.
The fifth Black resident trained at the oldest Jewish hospital in the country.
My question to you is
that was in 1980.
Mm-hmm. So how do we? So what are your suggestions, right? Or what is your outlook of us trying to get more of our young men into this field? Because a lot of things will be solved too if there's more Black doctors, right? If you had more opportunity to be seen by a Black doctor, right? Your chances are going to be higher. So like, what do we do, or like, what are some steps we can take?
Well, that's $1 million question, and certainly there are initiatives that are all over the country. Those in medical school, we have Black Men with a White Coats Project. We have a Black Men's Health Project. We also have Black men in medicine projects, and all of us have realized, and then of course there are these STEM programs, but I'll admit to you, Sublime Prince, that our STEM programs, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics for the past 25 years, has actually focused on getting more girls interested in those science fields. Now, unfortunately, it was very good because it was effective and it has worked. Unfortunately, we forgot about the guys along the journey. And so now we've got to figure out how to get young men, boys, young kids interested in the science and technology. Because now they've got social media, our work is really challenging for us. Why? Because what they see is rappers and ball players, and they look like that's all there is. Nobody is celebrating the doctor, the lawyer, the teacher, the principal, the engineer, et cetera, et cetera. They are celebrating rappers and singers and musicians. They are celebrating entertainment, while our young ladies, through STEM programs and otherwise, are stepping their game up. And that's why I say, here we are, 3%, and they're at 10% in medical schools and so forth. And these are even at the Black medical schools, the Meharys, the Howards, the Morehouses, and so forth. There's more of them there. Now, there's more women in medicine in general because the landscape has changed due to the shifting paradigm in the healthcare. But so it's an interesting thing altogether. And so that is not a one answer question, and no one's got a good blueprint, because I would say that guys that are my age, the baby boomers and all of us, we had an influx of Black doctors after the affirmative action and so forth in the revolution. And so in the 70s and 80s, a lot of us went to medical school. A lot of us went to dental school, law school, graduate school, and all that. But ever since that has happened, the same old thing of complacency has stepped into the fold. And now we look up and find that we're dwindling right back by the wayside. And so those disparities that we have fought so long to try to narrow the gaps of are starting to space themselves right back out as if we never did anything in the first place. And unfortunately, I'm 72 years old. So those guys that are in my age group, the baby boomer guys, trying to retire and go on to better things or the next challenge in their lives. And so it's a tough thing. And that's why I still teach the medical students and still teach the residents and so forth, because I believe that if another person is not coming to replace me, then the one thing that I can still do while still trying to figure the way out to get to our young people, because of course I go to programs at the churches and schools and so forth, but I'm one individual, but I must teach those doctors who are coming out of training now the nuances of taking care of us. That's the other piece that I must do. And at the Jewish hospital where I'm in the training program, I am the African American. I was the African American when I trained 40 years ago, and now I'm the African American that's doing the teaching. And that's just the way things are. I did National Grand Rounds lectures from 2007 to 2010 or 11, all over the country. And I'd say to you that all these hospitals and places that I lectured at in the South Dakota, and Louisiana, and Alabama, and New York, Georgia, West Virginia, Michigan, Wisconsin, all over, I was never lecturing in front of Black doctors. And where are the Black doctors? But you know what I did? I made sure that my stuff was laced up tight, because wherever I was, I said, I'll tell you what, wherever I'm going to know more about the subject than anybody that's there. And sometimes I did the same lecture 20, 25 times, and I studied it every time as if I'd never done it before. And so I made sure my stuff was laced up tight, because I already understood that I'm going to walk into this environment in an amphitheater where I'm looking up and everybody's something else other than what I am. And I said, I know they're going to do what they always do, the racial discrimination. They can't help themselves, the cultural barriers and biases and so forth. But I said, when I leave, they ain't hardly going to ask no questions, because they're not going to get shown up by the Black doctor who's waiting. My driver is waiting to drive me back to the airport in Milwaukee, and I'm going to fly back to Cincinnati, and they're going to get shown up by the Black doctor. I just understood that there was a position that I had, and it was, from my perspective, it was a position of strength.
I love that. I love that, because it's a lot, and hopefully one thing I'm hearing.
it's just the way it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
but we have to recognize where we are and work from within that scope and try to do as well as you can. But these the ramifications of what you're doing and where you are so far reaching. It's unbelievable. And we are always individually somewhere fighting in a battle somewhere. It's an interesting thing. In all the arenas and so forth, you're always somewhere fighting and battling. But if you're the one, you can do it. You just know you got to make sure your stuff has to be tight. But we have to use our resources and our influence to make sure we can bring some other young folks along and teach them how tight they're going to have to be. Because the same thing has been true for a long, long time. You can't be as good as you're going to be better than. It's that way. And I'm okay with that because I'd like to be good at what I'm doing.
And that's a big shout out to us because we're Scottish Rite Masons. We have the Cradle to College program. So this is a prime example of where we can get this information in there for them and let them know. Like there's a lot that can be done or can be had in this field and we can need it. I wish that I had some more details too as well. When I was coming in there, because I wasn't fully aware of like all the opportunities that were available to us. You know what I mean? So it's a very interesting.
But let me interject.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, all along the way, you're being steered somewhere else and someone's trying to tell you what you can't do. Of course, all of us have experienced that. There's always those pundits, those folks that are telling you that you're wasting your time, you're not going to be able to do this, you can't do that, and so forth. And when you don't have a strong family, if you will, a family constitution behind you, then you're easily dissuaded from your own dreams. And I always try to tell folks, dream with a plan is a vision. And I'm trying to teach my folks to make sure they have a vision, not just a dream. A dream's a dream, but you've got a dream with a plan, you have a vision. And in your plan, you have to recognize that it is a journey that you're on, even for your own health care from wherever you're starting today on June the 26th, 2024. Forget about what you didn't do, how bad off you are. In fact, you don't exercise, you got fat and your A1C is 12. Let's just go from here. Here's what you got to do to try to get there, because this is still a journey and you're hoping that you extend your journey as long as possible. And that's what we're here talking about today, and just talking about some tools that we use. Lower your sodium, know your numbers, exercise, find a doctor you trust, ask questions, decrease your smoking, decrease your alcohol, decrease the carbohydrates. Don't do all the stuff that you were doing. What got you there will keep you there. So change. But the change has to be, well, somewhat wholesale, but just do a little bit at a time, understanding that it is not a destination. It is clearly a journey that you're on for good health care in the African American men's community.
No, see, and that's I already knew when I talked to you. I was like, man, he's gonna have this wrapped up in a bag. See, that's a perfect way. That's a perfect segue to end this, so that everybody, as they're watching this, they can go back, they can repeat and understand these are the steps here. So again, Dr. Melvin, I thank you so much for taking your time out to have this conversation, because I've been telling people as I was doing a podcast, this is like personal for me. I'm asking questions I care about, right? These are things like, so I learned a lot, and hopefully everybody that's watching this can go back and say, hey, it doesn't matter where I'm at, where I was, excuse me. It's the journey. Like you said, it's like, hey, like let's start today, right? It's always a good time to be able to kind of start this process. So again, I would thank you so much for there. The last thing, I have a question here for you. If people are watching, if they want to look for like more resources or something they want to look up to kind of better prepare themselves, or at least kind of go down this road, do you have any suggestions or like different things for people to research or look up to kind of pique their curiosity or kind of get their mojo going a little bit down this subject?
Well, I think Steve, I think that folks can do those simple things of going on the internet like they do, and just put that question in there. Put the question in that's about yourself and about Black men's health. And you have a lot of different windows that come up, and it stimulates some of your own thoughts, because I think that the bottom line for all of us is that you're going to have to, you can't sit this one out. You can't sit on the sideline. You're actually going to have to get in this fight yourself. And just remember that it is a journey. So just look up some things and look up the medications that you're taking. And instead of just looking up the side effects of the medicine and from there deciding that you're not going to take the daggone medicine, look up the consequences of the disease that the medicine is treating. And maybe you yourself, without my encouragement, will realize that the benefit of the medicine outweighs the risk of the side effects that you might get. You already have the disease. You better take care of your high blood pressure. You better take care of your diabetes. You better take care of your elevated cholesterol, because don't worry about the medicine. So something, if it happens, we'll change it. But don't practice medicine without a license. That's my final word today.
Oh, look, Dr. Melvin, you didn't have to talk to me personally there. All right. Okay. So we didn't have to, I might have Googled a couple things here and there, you know what I mean? And some side effects. So I was like, but that's okay. We're brothers. I appreciate you. And I know it's coming from a place of love. But what we'll do here, like I said, is we're gonna wrap this up here. I would like to tell everybody the way that we go from this standpoint here. This is gonna be pretty awesome, right? Like I'm really excited about what's going on and what we're doing here at the United Supreme Council, as well as for the director of the medical, what we're actually doing. So what we do next here is make sure that you rewatch this, ask a whole bunch of questions, reach out to somebody. And I believe everything I've taken from here is just take action, right? I think that's the biggest note that I took from Dr. Melvin from your presentation is I need to know where I'm at, and then I just got to do something. Something's better than nothing, and that's going to start that catalyst of movement. So again, from us, from the Moving Camp podcast, from the education department that's ran by Sovereign Grand Inspector General Dr. Dwayne E. Thomas, we thank you all for your time and your patience, and look out for next month because we got a good one for you. Thank you so much.